Hello there. My name's Talia, and I was a conservative evangelical fundamentalist Christian for 30 years until I finally came out to myself as trans and was able to completely deconstruct my entire worldview. Whew, but it feels so good to be out of the cult. Man, I keep reflecting on how I used to be just like orders of magnitude more miserable. Like, I feel like I still am kind of a wreck, kind of a hot mess. Don't have my act together. Not adulting effectively. I do not have my, oh, what's it called? Executive function. That's it. I don't have my executive functioning up where it should be, or where I hope it can be at some point. It is true that I might be just disabled to some degree due to autism. Apparently, that's what my doctors have been telling me, at least. Um, I'm trying not to, I guess, assume. I'm not saying the worst, but I'm not just going to assume that I can't get any better than this because, man, I have a long way. I was so far down in a hole. I'm sure there's a long way yet to go before I think that I'm not making improvements anymore. Whew. Just being like not angry, sad, upset, and miserable all the time. Ah, it's just so much better. Now, the main problem for me is that I have been too much of a weed addict for a long time, and I'm really trying to fix that without like beating myself up and trying to like force myself to go cold turkey. Every time I've tried that for years now, it never works. Like being harsh with myself never works. So for quite a while now, I've just sort of given up on that, and I just keep using the weed, um, as long as I feel like I really, really want to. I guess as long as I feel that craving, I just keep feeding it. I suppose a lot of people would say that's just prolonging the problem. But again, if I just go cold turkey, I don't have any habits set up to replace that behavior, which has basically consumed my entire life at this point. I spend all of my time getting high and listening to music, usually, having like visions in my head that I'm using for the deconstruction a lot of times. I have different angelic figures that represent different aspects of my own personality, and I'm trying to integrate them together. So I've been spending a lot of time for years um, getting high and listening to music and having these sort of explorations in my mind, just almost like just sort of a fantasy trial run or experimentation, trying things out that I wouldn't want to do in real life, but it's just in my head. And the thing is, I believe that is helpful in a lot of ways because I have a lot of deprogramming of cult madness to do. And again, I still keep finding out that there's more that I didn't even know, more relief to be had, more more burdens and crosses to lay down and realize that I don't have to do that to myself anymore. It was not working. It wasn't leading to health and salvation. And I'm just not going to assume that it's all my fault. It's like the demons, it's the weakness of the flesh. I know all of that is involved, or at least because I still identify as a Christian, I use these terms symbolically, at least. I don't always think of these terms like demons, for example. I don't think of demons the way I used to as a fundamentalist. I don't think they're actual like imps or, succubi or whatever, invisible like monsters with bat wings. Not that I really thought that's what they were, but that's what you're always visualizing them as, because they're supposed to be intelligences. They're malevolent intelligences. So they're kind of like people, or we project onto them the idea that they're like people, just invisible, sort of like, well, the gods, of course. But what I've come to believe is that all of that is just metaphor and symbol. Like the laws of nature are not actually intelligences in the way that we are. I think envisioning these eternal invisible processes as just sort of creatures with invisible bodies and all of the same sort of baggage that comes with our embodiment and just the way we exist as creatures in the world, we sort of project that onto the demons. And I just don't think that's right. Well, even the angels, God himself, I mean, themselves, he, she, it, whatever. When you project these symbolic concepts onto the thing themselves, when you lose the perspective, lose track of the fact that you are dealing with symbols, you're not actually dealing with the thing itself. I think that can lead to some really negative things, at least in my own life, because I was ascribing too much willfulness and personality quirks and all of this. These things are just projections. We're taking the human psyche and trying to project it onto an image of perfection in monotheism a lot of times. But what that ends up doing is creating an idol. It's like Zeus. It's a guy sitting on a throne in the sky, throwing lightning bolts at the wicked. And I've just come to realize I don't believe that's what God is. God, angels, demons, any of it. I think these are just terms for nature. Specifically, the angels and demons, these are just terms for forces of nature. They're invisible, they're eternal. That's why they've been metaphorically depicted as people for thousands and thousands of years, since the dawn of time, probably. I think the main reason the ancients had the idea that these forces of nature are people is because it was just too complicated for them to figure out that it all does boil down to physics. From their perspective, things like weather, it's just capricious, or like the ocean, that they couldn't understand all of the reasons things happen. Like say when crops fail or something, they had to invent the idea of Demeter, mourning over the abduction of her daughter to explain, even things like the winter. Um, and again, I don't think they were dumb. I don't think the ancients were dumb. I think even they knew that they were symbolically understanding something. Or at least a lot of maybe the more educated pagans certainly didn't believe that these were actual like people messing with our affairs. Because the problem then is that you turn the divine, if that's your concept of the divine, then it's very imperfect. It's based on human sensibilities, human frailties even. You have Zeus flying into fits of anger or lust. He always gets horny for the hot human mortal ladies. And apparently he can't control himself. He has passions that just, or I don't know, maybe he just doesn't love Hera enough, which is also, a imperfection, one might say. Now, the pagan, I don't know, might makes right. If you believe that, when you're married, you can just do whatever you want, and your wife is just part of this social transaction, maintains the family, the household and the inheritance, creates your heir and all of that. I think a lot of people maybe were totally fine with Zeus just having all these flings. He's the king. He does whatever the heck he wants. He sees a hot chick, he grabs. Heck, he sees a hot lad, Ganymede, he just grabs him up, turns into an eagle and snatches him away and takes him to Olympus to be a sex slave forever. But, like he's kind of divinized, so I guess it's a good thing. I don't know, kind of a weird story. A lot of these, I believe even Plato thought that was a weird story. Like, he thought it was a self-serving justification of pederasty, I believe. Um, I'm not super certain about that. Anyway, I really got off track. I didn't really want to talk about all that stuff, I suppose. I'll try to get into my actual theological understanding at some later point. I guess the main thing I just wanted to report this time, Said, I'm trying again. I know I went a week. I didn't post anything last week. That's because I was just too depressed. Um, I wasn't eating enough. I wasn't cleaning my room. I wouldn't make my bed. And I had trash piling up under my desk. It was getting really depressing. And this is all part of the process, though. Again, I guess I got on that tangent because I was talking about the weed and how I'm not ascribing it to demons anymore. I'm not trying to like perform magic rituals of exorcism, like praying hard enough or doing enough spiritual disciplines. Like I used to think, oh, the problem is me. I just need to rely on God more, right? Like if I really relied on God, then He would be freeing me from, these temptations. Now, of course, you got like Paul talking about the thorn in the flesh that would never be removed, right? And at some point, God might say, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Classic line. Um, Despite the many problematic things that Paul said, I still get a lot of inspiration from a lot of his writing. I do think he was a patriarchal, aristocratic Greco-Roman, a man of his time. He couldn't see past his own blindnesses, and God did not completely give him miraculous, infallible, prophetic insight right then and there. I mean, not completely. He didn't give him the complete picture. The Spirit is still unfolding these truths to future generations yet unborn. There are more riches of God's grace to be discovered. Paul didn't have all of that given to him, even in his vision of heaven that was so inexpressible he wouldn't even say anything about what it was. Maybe I don't know, maybe maybe in that case, if it's literally something inexpressible, then maybe you have seen something um, miraculous, quote unquote. Again, all of this, I guess it is kind of touchy now. Identifying, I still identify as a monotheist, but I have all of these almost polytheistic sort of metaphors that I use. And ultimately, I think I really do believe that God is the laws of nature, like the sum total of all of the laws of nature, the unification of all being, whatever is at the core of being itself, whatever essential, irreducible fact there is at the very bottom of existence. If that makes any sense at all, it's a metaphor. But I do believe that's what God is. It's not some guy. It's not Zeus. It's not even a better Zeus, like a more loving and just Zeus. Like to some degree, that's all Christianity got to. At least the institutionalized Roman Christianity, right? Based on the culture of Rome, the enemies in the story. They ended up defining Christianity for hundreds of years. And we're supposed to just accept that and, accept that the Romans had everything figured out, that their interpretation of the gospel was complete and something that we need to just be worshiping and accepting today. The way they treated women, slaves, come on, slavery. The early church fathers were not out in the streets campaigning against slavery necessarily. Now, one wouldn't expect them to, but it seems like they didn't even have the vision to see what could be possible. They were trying to just, advise people to be better slave masters, right? And advise slaves on how to like cope with the situation with honor and dignity, at least in your soul, because you know that the true master and lord of all is not just your master, he's the master of your human master. This human who claims to be your master is also a slave to God, right? God is the only slave master at the end of the day. And that's a horrifying idea if you've got a vision of God who's tyrannical, arbitrary, and just doesn't explain himself, doesn't actually relate the things that he condemns, that he prohibits with actual morality. Like this whole divine command theory, absolutely disgusting in my opinion. The idea that God could just command anything you wanted, even something we would now say is immoral, or and God could just decide that it's not immoral. What? That's not. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, if God doesn't change, if God is rational, if God is the truth, uh, then everything has to be woven together. Everything has to come from that one source. And I don't even believe that the laws of cause and effect, which seem so tyrannical, talk about a slave master. It's the laws of cause and effect that we're all in fear of and worshiping because that's what screws us over. Well, that's what punishes us. That's what causes us to uh, bear these consequences for our actions. Sometimes, a lot of times we're not trying to cause these consequences at all. Just human frailty, the fact that we don't know everything, and we make mistakes and we keep sinning. I believe the term sinning just means to make a mistake. It doesn't, it's not some metaphysical contamination. That's just, again, it's not just arbitrary, like this purity code thing where it's just, oh, certain critters are, you can't eat them. Like, there are reasons, maybe. There are obvious reasons why, the Torah prohibited eating vultures um, and rats and such. Um, that does make sense on a visceral level. It even makes sense on a practical level. But then when they took these things and made them metaphysical constructs for morality, for moral purity, they projected these rituals and taboos, which are there to help society function, I suppose, to help us make decisions without thinking things all the way through because we're just relying on the wisdom of past generations who, they survived in order to pass on their legacy to us. So in theory, we should be able to trust their teachings, and then we too can achieve that survival and posterity that they achieved. But it's not necessarily the case. Like, just because people survive, that's not how evolution works. People can reproduce pretty darn early, right? Like, well, puberty. And that's the point where evolution kind of, like, evolution isn't going to keep refining things forever past the point when you're already having children. Like, it doesn't have to give you more and more longevity or immunity from disease, or it's not built to create creatures that just never age and never suffer any harm or illness. That's not what evolution can do. And even the evolution of human societies. Sorry, I know I'm just rambling. I'm just talking off the top of my head. That's what this whole channel is, except for the singing. I got to get back into that, by the way. And I lost my train of thought, of course. But I really believe that it's important that we think of God not as some guy, some person with passions and prejudices and big feelings and a body, even a spirit. Even if this is all spiritualized, if you're still visualizing a guy sitting in a chair, a guy with a certain, like a beard or whatever it is, like, you're picturing like a king, like a human king. And yes, God is called, the king. God is called the Father. We have these images for God. But people get stuck on them. And I don't think that's what God really is. I mean, it's true in the sense of the symbolic, of the metaphorical. It does convey truths that can't be communicated any other way. That's the purpose of symbolism, I believe. It's to express the inexpressible, or at least try to figure out things that you haven't figured out yet. And it took so long for science to discover all of these miracles of healing that we have today. Jesus said, "You will perform miracles far greater than anything that I've ever done," to his disciples, right? I believe this is what he was talking about. Modern medicine. My gosh, talking about opening the eyes of the blind, there are so many amazing things that modern medicine can do. And it's it's all from approaching the universe not as some sort of arbitrary aristocratic, you just got to suck up to the king and then it doesn't matter what the law says. Like, that's not that's not the gospel, I believe. So anyway, I really want to figure out how to preach my own understanding better. But part of that is I even need to be able to express my own understanding better, or even formulate to myself what I'm even trying to say, because it's so hard for me to explain what's different. Why I feel like I was literally born again twice, basically. Like if you want to say the initial conversion experience when I was a like 4 year old, and converted to evangelical Christian, became a born again Christian, not just a cultural Christian at 4 years old. So, I had a very naive and childlike understanding, but I believe that was valid. That was in a very childlike way. That was me trying to say, oh, I want to be a good person. I want to get to heaven. Um, and it's just a shame that we got all of this fear mongering about hell thrown in there because it just overwhelms everything. And then for decades, I was just living in terror of this God who supposedly made all these arbitrary rules, like you can't have gay sex or whatever. Like I. I, I honestly believed that I was straight my entire life, and yet I never understood what was so awful, like why people were so disgusted or whatever. Because I guess, as I now know, because I was bi, from puberty. So for me, it never seemed unnatural, and I didn't get the talk, I didn't get enough sex ed until I actually got into middle school, with the public school. So my parents somehow didn't, I don't know, somehow they didn't teach me the details. Like I learned a lot of stuff about the moral expectations and how you're just not supposed to have sex until you're married, all of this stuff like that. And I internalized a lot of that. But some of it I just couldn't, I was just like, but that's not true. That's not my experience. Like so when people tried to tell me that masturbation was a sin, like I'm sorry, by the time they tried to tell me that, by the time they thought I was mature enough or whatever to have those, youth group Bible studies talking about that stuff, I'm sorry, it was way too late. Like I figured that out. I figured out how to, comfort myself very early, like 11 or something. And it was just total, no one could convince me at that point retroactively that it was something evil or wrong because I didn't have like an ingrained sense that had been imposed on me from other people's teachings and expectations. I hadn't gotten that memo early enough, and I just figured out for myself that there's nothing, there's no problem. I mean, it just feels good. Like it's, how am I hurting anybody? How am I even hurting myself? They call it like self abuse and such, and I'm like, what are they even talking about? And the thing is, it's like a self fulfilling prophecy because it became self abuse, man. Like when you're trying to control something like that, dude, it literally got to the point where I was literally torturing myself in order to try not to masturbate. And that is just ridiculous. That is not what God wants for anybody, is to like literally torture yourself in order to avoid future torture in hell. That was the idea. It was like, oh, well, gosh, I might as well punish and torture myself now to keep myself, to prevent myself from sinning more, or else I might end up in like a literal prison torture chamber that lasts forever. That was the mindset, and that's why it ended up getting just way too hardcore in this. When you forbid something, it ends up being more tempting, of course. Anyway, I'm scattered all over the place. I will try to make shorter videos and actually talk about like one topic at a time. And try to make them only like 10 minutes. So that's my goal in the future. I will say the thing that I wanted to say from the beginning. The main thing that I'm encouraged about now, even though I had a bad week, last week I was depressed the whole time, I couldn't do any videos, the room was getting all messy, but it's nice now. Like, I actually did some cleaning, and the amazing thing is that I'm actually out of weed, except for some gummies, and I did take uh, a little bit of that. But my tolerance is crazy high. I usually can't even feel gummies at all. So that's just to tide me over and keep me from having cravings. And I got a couple more days of that. If I do feel, a because the thing is, in the past, by now I would be like freaking the heck out of for not having weed for this long. Like, it's been a whole day. I know, just one day. That's pretty pathetic, but that's a big deal for me. Like, it's been a long time. I think it's basically since I don't know. Before I came out, I mean, I was an alcoholic. That was way, way worse. But I didn't really become a weed addict until after I transitioned, and that helped me no longer be an alcoholic. But I kind of just replaced the alcohol with the weed, which is a lot less toxic in my opinion, and it was helping me actually think things through. Think outside the box. Leave my comfort zone. I feel like alcohol mainly just dulls. It can release repression to some degree, but I feel like it doesn't actually help you think through what you're doing. Whereas cannabis, it's almost too much of that. It basically just put me in a trance, and as I still use it for, just I use it to just enter my mind's eye and live in my dreams without having to actually learn how to do lucid dreaming. I actually tried to learn how to do lucid dreaming, like, 20 2009 maybe, I don't know, way back in the day, and I failed. It was just too hard for me. I couldn't even remember a single dream. I couldn't do any of the journaling, and I was lazy. I get well, and also at that point I really was getting suicidal. So at that point I did turn to the drugs because that seemed like a less harmful thing to do than what I was otherwise sort of wanting to do, or it was really a self sort of almost like yeah, again, I almost just wanted to torture myself and punish myself. I was just really good at doing it in ways that wouldn't leave marks, right? I didn't want to leave scars. I wanted everything to be invisible and all in my head. And that's why I turned to drugs. It's basically a way to just sort of beat up my mind without beating up my body. Well, except it is beating up your body on the inside, especially that alcohol. Anyway, I'm feeling really good this time. It's been a long time. It's been several years now that I've just been using weed like every day. And it's just completely taken over my free time. Fortunately, I at least have a job these days. I was totally out of work and just hiding in my room, thinking about theology and politics and all of this stuff for a good year. But I've been working again. That's helpful. It also reminds me that I don't want to do that job forever. It's just a fast food service job. I think it's not actually helping in terms of my diet uh, because of how bad the economy is. I'm reluctant to buy food. Also, I don't have transportation right now, so it's kind of a chore to drag groceries home. So I try to eat basically relying on the food that I get from work, and it's like fast food. It's Five Guys, so it's really greasy. I think my cholesterol is going to be in bad shape. But I think that was sort of running me down physically to some degree. That was part of my depression lately, is that I've just been eating too much, too many burgers, and I really need to figure out how to get my diet going again. My rice cooker died. I think that was a big problem, or it has been a problem. I need to learn how to use the communal rice cooker here at the house, and add more frozen vegetables. And because when they're frozen, at least I know that they won't go bad. I have a problem with buying vegetables and then they go bad. So go in the frozen route. That should be helpful. Again, I need transportation though. I just keep asking my mom for rides. I guess until I buy my new bike, which I've been procrastinating on. But hopefully, I can start working on some of this stuff. Start chipping away at it. Again, I already cleaned my room. that's a big that's not as big a deal, but it's a good thing. It shows that, I've been sober all day. Usually that would make me sort of like frantic. Like in the past, I was literally like picking butts out of the ashtrays. I was so desperate. If I ran out of weed, I would be like, like literally, like I would, the kind of person who would commit crimes. It's a good thing I didn't have opportunity. Because, when you're that addicted, it can feel like, life or death or whatever, which it isn't, of course. But I really worked myself up into a bad state. Last couple of years have been pretty dire in terms of the weed consumption, or at least it's it's at the point where I need to move on. I think it's been helping. I've been doing so much deconstruction. That is a big deal. Changing my whole worldview from the bottom up. I was born and raised in the fundamentalist cult, basically. Not an extreme fundamentalist cult, but enough so that it did kind of mess me up, especially with the undiagnosed autism and queerness that I didn't even understand, and so I was attributing it all to demons and using my own theological language to understand these things that I couldn't understand. That's why it's been so important for me to revisit the idea of demons, and because I feel like it helps me put labels on things that I don't have perfect vision of yet. I can create labels to triangulate between other things that I have experienced, and I feel like this helps me figure out the demon that I need to exercise. Again, not with magic spells. It's all nature. And I don't even believe the demons are truly. I don't know. That's hard for me. I'm not sure that the demons are damned. When the entire world is transformed and made new, when the new Jerusalem descends and the heavens and earth are remade, I, I don't know. Because I think of the angels and demons as being the forces of nature, to me that implies that they will all be redeemed, purified. And I don't believe in hell anymore for humans either. So, like, heck, I don't know. It's just really hard because evil is evil and it needs to be punished. I still believe in evil and I know evil needs to be punished. I believe it is punished. I believe that the wrath of God falls on the wicked because I experienced it for years. The drug addiction is part of the wrath of God, I'm sure. But God's blows the is beating with a with a rod, as advised in the Bible. Sheesh. Metaphorically, again, I really believe this is just the laws of nature, and it's for our good in the sense that the laws of nature are just they can't be changed. They are what they are. We have to accept them. And I just don't know what else to say, I guess. I don't know. I keep losing my train of thought. At some point I will try again to leave some notes for myself, make some outlines. I haven't been able to do that yet. Still have a lot of trouble with writing. But maybe I will try to just write freehand. That'll help me avoid the editing problem where if I write things on the computer, I'll just edit it to death. I won't ever get anywhere. So I gotta keep coming up with new ideas to figure out what God wants of me, what the plans, the good deeds that God has prepared in advance for me to walk in. I believe they're out there. I just haven't found them yet, and it's a long process. It's not even a linear progress scenario. But I really believe that I was able to be born again a second time, uh, and it's so refreshing. It's almost, and again, I realize it's not really a miracle. It's just the laws of nature. But the laws of nature are themselves such wonderful gifts, I believe. We don't even understand the true depth of the laws of nature, I believe. And that's because I believe that God is love. And so ultimately, somehow, I believe metaphysically, everything is founded on love. I don't know what that even means physically. And maybe I'm not making any sense. I know if I try to preach my own understanding of the gospel, I'm probably just going to confuse people and even myself. There's going people are just going to tear it apart. I know. You do anything online, put it out on main. There are people all over the world that'll just that know so much more than you or have so many different experiences, different perspectives. They'll find whatever inconsistency or flaw or where you're just not making your own system cohere. There are people out there that'll, nitpick you and call you out if you try to present some sort of grand system. But that's the thing. I'm not actually presenting a grand system. I don't believe that I've discovered some universal gospel that I need to share with everybody. I just believe I've discovered the universal principle that we can trust God, even when it seems like we can't. I know the problem of pain, the problem of evil, is such a huge problem. Huge. Very difficult. I cannot argue it away. I don't know how right now. That's literally faith. I literally, at some point, I just have to, by faith, say, I believe that the world is built ultimately on something good, not something meaningless or arbitrary or wicked. It is what it is because reality coheres. Reality is what it's supposed to be, all based on its own foundational principles. And somehow I want to be able to explain the joy that I found, even though I'm still miserable half the time, and I'm still just avoiding, procrastinating, and getting high just day after day. I haven't looked at my email or let alone snail mail in so long. I know, like, sometimes I get a pang of panic. And this is why it's been taking so long for me to get off the weed and actually start addressing these things, because I just get panic. I don't want to deal with it. I've been putting things off for so long. It's overwhelming. It just freaks me the heck out, and I can't do it. And this has been happening for so long. I would just shut down. I mean, college, high school, probably even. And I know at some point I just need to stop trying to do things that I can't do. There are some things where God is just not going to remove that barrier or that thorn in the flesh, and you got to accept that. And so I'm still trying to negotiate between optimism, a faith-based hope, but I don't want to be an idiot, and uh, I don't want to just expect God to do everything for me, like He's the servant or whatever. Like I'm the one who has to figure out what the heck my own existence is apparently all about, and that's it's really frustrating. But it's the gift that every human has been given. We define our own souls to some degree. I have to believe it. Again, how does free will fit into the laws of physics and the laws of cause and effect? I do not know. Invoke quantum physics or whatever, but I know that's just like God of the gaps. That's just explaining something away by appealing to something that seems so mysterious. I'm like, oh, surely quantum physics will explain how God is love, or how the whole universe boils down to love. I don't know. Maybe that's never going to happen. But I really want to share the good news that I believe I've received, because I can just feel it in my body. Things are so much better. So much better now than they have been for years. Even just a couple months, maybe even weeks ago, I was worse off than I am now. This is very unusual that I've gone a whole day without weed and I'm not panicked and freaking out and dumpster diving or running off, running off to, or breaking into. Anyway, I won't get into that. The past is the past. Fortunately, there's a lot of grace. I've been shown a lot of grace by my housemates. Been very kind. This is the place I went to after I finally left my parents again. And I was a complete wreck. Coming out for the first time. I'm surprised they let me in, but they're very nice, and I'm very thankful for that. For having been given, the opportunity. I know a lot of people. I'm very privileged. A lot of people don't have the ability to just take a year, several years, just off of their life, just give up on their career or whatever, give up on their social life, and just go focus on figuring out their your own your own brain, just working through your own transition and deconstruction. Like that's what I've been working on. And I believe it's important. It hasn't been a waste of time. And ultimately, it's okay that I haven't been able to progress with a career yet or whatever. I know people are going to say you're just making excuses, but being autistic is a real thing. And I'm convinced, there are qualified experts who've told me that I have autism, okay? I'm not just making that up. I had a whole big old battery of written whatever. The diagnosis I'm sure cost my parents a lot of money. So I get to claim it. And again, that's another privilege that I have is that I was able to get the diagnosis. But that has been so helpful. And getting some psychiatric care again, I finally, after I started coming out, I finally got enough hope to try with psychiatry again because they had kept just misdiagnosing me and it was always just making things worse. Had been for years. So I just gave up and stopped trying for quite a while. But the science of psychiatry is actually advanced during my lifetime. Like, heck, when I was a kid, nobody even knew about. Well, I guess some experts knew about a lot of things. It was not common knowledge, or even just knowing about the queer community, what it actually is, was not necessarily common knowledge, especially in my uh, situation with how I was raised and being in a very, very tiny town, 600 people. So it was a public school, but it had like 40 kids in it. Uh, so I don't know. I was just kept really naive for a really long time, and that's okay. It kind of sucks because the the check always comes due. You can't just live in a fantasy land forever and get away with it. I guess maybe some people can, but that's not healthy for you. Like that's not going to help you actually develop your soul if you just keep getting bailed out and just get away with things forever and never learn any real lessons and never actually have a reason to work on yourself because you have to that what you're doing just isn't working. I feel like I'm actually blessed in that way of being able to have had a real, like a serious midlife crisis where I literally just freaked the heck out and gave up on everything to figure things out. I think that's been really helpful. And I just wish I could express that in a way that would help other people. I know this is not helping. 45-minute long rants at the camera, not necessarily helping. I'm not sure anybody watches these. I wouldn't blame them if they don't. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess I've run out of things to say. Too bad I can't edit any of these things. It's so ridiculous. I'm gonna have to. There's so much I have to learn. Again, I've just been high every day for so long. I just haven't been learning things. I bought this, or I switched from PC to Mac quite a while ago. Before I came out, this is when I was trying to become a web engineer, which I unfortunately failed at. But that would have been very convenient. I could have been that stereotypical trans coder. But I wasn't able to. And again, like back then, I was a complete wreck. I hadn't come out to myself yet. I was an alcoholic. There's a lot of reasons why it didn't work out. Um, but the main thing is that I've had this computer for a long time and I haven't learned how to use it in a lot of ways. I guess time has sort of like passed me by because I just opted out and was hiding in my own room, just not caring about things for a long time. And I've just sort of been using this computer without knowing what it really can do for years now. And I'm finally going to try to make some progress with that. Hopefully this audio works better now. I finally did enough research. I figured out I needed a special app in order for this wireless transmitter to be able to adjust the gain. So I've got the gain at the max. I hope it actually sounds loud enough for people now. Otherwise, I'll have to go back to either the headset or I can use the desktop microphone again. The headset's kind of annoying because I think something about oh, it's probably because I have to turn off. It only has a single channel, I believe, so I have to turn off the sound coming in order for it to go out. I'm I'm not sure. It takes a little bit of time for it to figure out that I'm trying to talk into the microphone and actually route it to the. I don't really know what's up with it, but I haven't been using the headset microphone lately because I don't really understand what's going on there. But again, a lot of these things I just have to finally do some research. I've been putting it off for years and years. I just not figuring stuff out. And if I'm just finally going to be able to not be high all the time, I'll be able to finally figure some stuff out once in a while. And yeah, I already did, I guess. There's something that I hadn't figured out yet. I've got the right app, I hope. And it seems to be working. Now, hopefully, I can use these wireless microphones, and that'll free me up a little bit. I don't really want to go back to the desktop microphone because I want to be able to get up and move around. Oops. I got my foxtails still these days. Oop. I actually adjusted its connection to this belt, and it's nice now because it can completely flip around. So when I sit in a chair, I can have it sitting up like a squirrel. It's almost like an inbuilt cushion. And then, of course, when I go out, when I'm standing up, then it can drape down. But yeah, I've been really enjoying this. I finally got this set up. Again, I had this for years. I bought the wrong connection, and I didn't figure out how to connect it to a belt this for so long. It's just silly. Literally, I just needed a couple washers and nuts and bolts, and it's not the best. It does sort of like, I need to get a better setup because it kind of hurts my tailbone a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoy it though. I think I'm getting more attention when I protest. The main reason I wear the ears and tail, originally the cat ears and tail, I think it was because I just wasn't getting enough attention as like a transgender femboy, protesting out there. Or that's it. I felt like I needed some way to actually make my statement no matter what I was wearing. Like sometimes it's cold and it's hard to actually present femme, at least in my case, because I got the facial hair and I don't have much curves at all, um, or basically none. So if I wear like a coat, if it's cold and I wear a coat, then it just completely obscures whatever I might be wearing and the shape of my body. So I guess I just wanted to have extra. I wanted to make extra sure that people know that I'm making an anti-MAGA statement wherever I go by being as flamingly queer as I can. And it's fun, but I have to move on. I think this is good. That I'm finally going to be able, I hope, to work on my side hustle, um, see if I can actually make some progress, or at least just develop some better habits. And that's what's going to be key for me to get out of this state of just using weed all the time to think about things. Like it's got to get to the point where I'm going to do more. I've been thinking a lot. It was really necessary. I'm glad I was able to take the time to deconstruct and transition and then figure out that I wasn't actually able to transition the way I initially thought. I don't know. I wouldn't say that I detransitioned because I guess I've always identified as a femboy basically, but I used to think that required a lot more feminization, which I was trying to maintain. And thank goodness, that was a long process too, of figuring out what actually works. This is why people are supposed to go through this process in, junior high or whatever, in elementary and high school. is a much better environment for just figuring out who you are. I suppose because you actually you haven't entrenched all of this baggage. So and unfortunately, I was just not able to really explore myself as as a kid in a lot of ways. There were a lot of things I just assumed you had to be, and I wouldn't allow myself to figure out. And so I finally had to do it, and it's so wonderful to be born again, born of the Spirit, not of flesh, not of a father's desire. I forget the exact quote, but it's a good one. We are not defined by our parents, by how we were born, any of that. We define ourselves within the nature of reality, the structure of reality, which somehow allows free will or an appearance of it. It gives us the ability to shape our destinies within the parameters that have been set out by the laws of physics and the nature of ethics and all of these things that are just beyond us. We cannot just create reality. We can't bend reality to our will, but we can create ourselves. We can change ourselves. That is repentance. That is salvation. A state of health, no matter what befalls, whether the climate changes, whether all of these things have their time. They come and go. We're in our generation, and it's a good place to be, but it's not heaven. It's not perfection. It's not the end of the road where we've figured everything out. Of course not. But that's the journey. I believe we're co-creators with God. Everything still sucks to some degree now because we're still in time. So it can't be perfect yet because there's still time. Perfection literally can't exist if more time can go on and it can get any better. I don't know. I guess that's just how I'm thinking of things right now. Whew. Okay, well, I rambled too much and I lost my train of thought, and I really wish I could edit these at some point, but I'm just going to publish this anyway. So hopefully I can actually make a little bit better progress with making shorter videos and keeping to specific topics for longer. But I just wanted to leave a update, especially because of the weed thing. I really hope. I really hope it's going to be different this time. I've said this many a time. I've been saying I'm trying to quit weed for like years and years. But there's a time and a purpose for everything under heaven. Just like I was able to quit alcohol almost without trying, almost without realizing it, when the time came and I no longer had the desire. I lost the desire naturally. I believe the same thing will happen with weed. I know it will. When I'm not as depressed, when I'm not reaching for that coping strategy because I'm just always overwhelmed and don't want to deal with reality. That's what it's been like for so long. I've gotten used to it. I'm not even used to not being freaked out all the time. So that's what I have to finally start trying again, I guess, and see how it's going to be different, because I know things really, really sucked the last time I was trying, to be an adult or whatever, get a real career. And but that was before I came out. That was before I had the right psychiatric medication that seems to be working. That was before I even knew anything about the autism that helps me actually understand things and helps me actually put things in a context and know what I can change and how to work on those things that can help me actually be more productive and have more of that executive function that I've heard about, that mythical executive function. I'm definitely not going to be like, I'm not like a small business owner. Well, sheesh. And now of course, if I try to be a webcam model, I guess technically that is working for yourself, and I'd have to figure out how to be more on the ball about things. So it really is a big deal. I really believe the whole trying to be a webcam stripper is not like giving up and opting out and just like throwing my life away. So I believe it's the next step in trying to help myself learn these new habits that are actually going to be helpful. They're going to help me be more productive in society. Less of this left, like just miserable incel that's not pleasant to be around. So I'm always hiding in my room because I know I'm not pleasant to be around. I really want to get to that point where I'm not trying to escape reality all the time, where I can create my own little pocket of reality that is heaven or heaven for the moment. Again, everything has its time, but the kingdom of heaven is among us. It starts now. We're not just waiting for some idyllic existence beyond time. In fact, I'm not even sure I know what that metaphor even means. The resurrection and eternal life. I'm not even sure I understand whether I take that literally anymore. But I know it's going to be all right. Like, if we dissolve back into the universe, that is being with God. We will be with God again, whatever that means. However, our intelligences are encoded or preserved in whatever way, I don't even know. And again, we will not be the same as we are now. It's like the thing that is sown is like a seed, and it grows into a plant. You can't even see from the shape of the seed. You don't know what plant it's going to grow into unless you already know what that seed grows into. You can't just tell by what it looks like. And that's how we all are. We're developing into something that we don't even fully understand yet, I believe. As Paul said, I forget the quote though. Forget the reference I was trying to make. I got so much biblical references rattling around. Oh well. Whew. Okay, well that's it. Looks like I'm up. Oh man, up to an hour. I'm gonna have to learn how to edit things at some point and not just repeat myself endlessly. Okay, bye. I'll try to actually do some better videos this week and maybe actually do some singing again. I haven't been doing that because of the weed. The weed has been affecting my, it's making it more difficult for me to sing. Or I think maybe part of it though is I'm actually becoming more attuned, more attentive to my mistakes, and it bothers me more. And then that makes me upset and I don't want to sing anymore because I don't sound good enough to myself. But that's what I need to get through is sucking for a while. You can't just instantly be good at something you don't know how to do yet. I have to go through that process of finding something that I actually want to do, even though I suck at it. And honestly, I really think the whole webcam stripper thing is a good idea. It's a good plan. I really believe it because of just my personality, the autism, and all of this. I need something where I can just be an amateur, where there is no bar for success or failure beyond whether you can get somebody to pay to spend time with you. And you're in complete control of your own limits. Thank God it can be online. I would just not be able to deal with any of this stuff in person, apparently. I'm still a 40-year-old virgin because even after I came out, I've been unable to just dive into that physical stuff. I think just because of the autism. I don't like the sensory input, and it just freaks me out to feel like I'm out of control. I guess that's why I like masturbation, right? But that's not, if you can share it though with another person, then you're both in control of your own bodies, but you're also sharing that emotional connection. And that's what I'm trying to learn how to do, and I want to learn how to help people, poor miserable incels. I want to help them escape, from their gooner den, which I know only too well. Uh, Talk about self-abuse. Yeah, the gooning thing can definitely turn into self-abuse when you're literally just continuing to jack off even though you're hurting yourself. Sheesh, and that used to be a problem. Thank God, so much better these days. So much better. And I want to share with other people the good news, even though I know everybody's different, and what helped me is not going to help everybody else. But I just want to figure out how to share some hope that whatever works, whatever might work for you, I don't even, it's not necessarily the same thing that worked for me at all. But I just believe that there's something out there that will work for you as well, because that's what I discovered after so many years of believing that I was just a lost cause, basically. That I was just holding on by my fingernails, trying not to be sent to hell. Hopefully I was just going to get, burned up in the fire and come out with nothing but be saved, with the wood, hay, and stubble all consumed. That was what I was aiming for a while. That was really bad. So again, I'm so thankful, and I'm hopeful, and I'm gonna keep trying. I'm gonna try again. And I know it's not gonna be fun all the time. It's gonna be ups and downs, not linear progress. But there's always a new day for salvation. There's more salvation to be received. I believe it. Until the end of the world. Whew, everything has its place. All right. I guess that's it. Ta-ta.